Call to order the March 18th, 2019 Borough Assembly meeting. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Kurt?
Here.
Jeff?
We'll call Jeff excused, but he said he was going to be calling in, so if those of you listening at home hear him chime in later, I will make an announcement.
Bob?
Here.
Taylor?
Taylor is excused.
Mark?
Mayor Jensen is excused.
Brandy? Here. Jay?
Here.
Thank you.
And let us rise for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, that brings us to approval of minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of, January 22nd, 2019. Is that correct, Debbie?
That is correct.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes have been approved. At this point, I would entertain a motion to either amend or approve tonight's meeting agenda.
A second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. The agenda has been approved as is. There are no public hearings this evening, nor are there any bid awards. Points number 7, persons to be heard related to the agenda. And before I have some people come forward, a friendly reminder, in the words of my friend Walter Sobchak, this is not Vietnam, there are rules, and we use the rules of Robert's Rules of Order, which just means please be respectful and civil, to refrain from name-calling or personal attacks. And seeing the faces in the audience I see, I know that won't be an issue, but I'd suppose make it a point to say that nonetheless. So, is everybody to speak tonight? Mr. Berg, come forth, state your name and who you represent, and we'll begin. And one last reminder, as dictated by code, each person will be given 5 minutes to speak. And if you run that long, I'll give you a 30-second warning so that you can find a way to be efficient.
Thank you.
Please proceed, sir.
Mr. Mayor and Assemblyman, I'm David Berg. I represent Viking Travel today, and I'm here to speak for Uncruise Adventures concerning the public use of the Assembly Chambers. I'd like to speak in favor of the Borough renting the Assembly Chambers to commercial entities for meetings and for other events. I realize that there are other venues in the community that are available for public use and rent, but they're not always available on a continuing basis. Uncruise would like a place where they can share, can have their guests assemble for each Friday during the day from late June until early September this summer. Initially, Uncruise had the Hanson, the NSA&B building lined up with the local Petersburg Market, and Fairview Farms wanted that venue on more than a few of those Fridays for their public market. Uncruise would like to have a place that's consistent with each of their weekly sailings and not have to hop around potentially confusing their guests and other vendors. Guests typically gather before or after getting off of the ship, waiting for planes home or other activities in town before they board their cruise. And they browse the internet or play games or share stories and photos of the trip while they wait. We provide an on-site hostess all day to help by providing directions and other information as needed by the guests. So the guests wouldn't be bothering Borough employees. They would be pretty much confined to this room rather than being out in the foyer. Of course, they'd use the restrooms and come and go during the day. So thank you. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions, Mr. Berg? Thank you for your testimony, sir.
Mm-hmm.
I apologize, Dave. That was yet to be trying to call it.
Yes, he said the access code was not working.
Trying again. He should be on soon.
Okay. Duly noted. Other people that would like to speak? Mr. Mergus, please go ahead. Your name and who you represent, please.
My name is John Mergus. I represent myself and my business, Petersburg Marine, and my employees. And I'd like to address item 15C, request by Assembly Member Merle to, my request is that you allow that to move forward. I think Assembly Member Merle's request has very strong merit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mertis. Other people with views related to the agenda, go ahead, as always. Yes.
I believe Jeff might be on the phone.
Oh, yes, and for those listening at home, member Jeff Mucci is called in. Is that you, Jeff?
Yes, it is, Jake.
All right, thank you. Welcome. All right, sorry, name and who you
That's
represent.
okay.
Please proceed.
Good evening. My name is Amber Borough, and I represent the 31 people that signed this sheet and the other one that went to Sitka this morning, so is not here. And we would strongly encourage you guys to take a look at this industrial code again. It was the intent that it was supposed to streamline the process, not make it necessary for special use permits, and we really don't think there's a lot of clarity. Someone in the audience made a little graph that was a little bit easier to read. It was more in line with what the previous wording was and what it is now. But this hasn't been approved. I mean, Liz hasn't read through it. This is just something that, okay, is this right? Is this not right? There's a lot of confusion under that industrial code. And there's a lot of people that bought industrial land with the express purpose of doing things with it. Many people in this room have really great ideas, growth opportunities, or maybe just building a home with a home business. Those are really being limited right now. And I do not think that our economy can afford to not allow industrial lots to promote industry. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Amber. I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Of course.
And I'm going to give you these in case you...
Please, and thank you. Other
Amber, I think we all...
persons who would like to speak, please just step up and announce your name and who you represent.
Hi, my name is Pete Litzheim, and I represent myself, and my business is the Mill Incorporated in Diamante Gift Shop, Teresa Litzheim. As excited and upset as many people who own property in Petersburg Borough are, and I think there's a lot more than even have come, I really believe that this thing should start over from ground zero. And I'm going to tell you why. There's a huge precedent. I don't know how it was ignored. I don't know how it was missed, of homes being built on industrial land. South Harbor to the south is all industrial land. I've been parts of people building their homes on that industrial land. It was not a complicated issue back in the 70s and 80s. I think this one, for some reason, I don't know if it generated from staff or if it generated from the elected advisory board, but it seems like when Bill Manish decided to start investing a lot of money developing a piece of industrial land, everything hit the fan, and it's, you can't do this, you can't do that. And it's like, I asked a question at Planning and Zoning last week, what about precedent? What about all the, I mean, you think of it, Jerry O's home is on industrial land. Everything above him to the Severson, I think it's Severson Road, that's industrial land, houses built on industrial land. So here's the perception: when somebody wants to buy now, you're changing the code, and all of a sudden somebody who's built on industrial land, but you're going to change that code. But see, buying and selling property is based a lot on perception. And this is a huge negative impact on people who have invested for many years, people who have recently invested. And I want to ask you a question. We were told at the last meeting that these colors, these pretty painted things, are a done deal. So, Don't even talk about that because this is already in code. So I disagree with that. I thought, what are we going to talk about then? If this is already in rock or stone or cement, or whatever you want to call it, I think this was good from wherever it came from, because I'm sure that community had the time to sit down and rationalize and think about it and figure it all out. But I think this should have started, instead of somebody from staff or somebody from planning and zoning saying, hey, I got a bright idea. We don't like what an investor's doing who's been in this town forever, so let's change the whole thing. I think when that planning and zoning or that staff person came to the council or the assembly and asked you, because I know what really happened, they don't have the power to just go out of their own advisory position and just say, hey, we're going to look at adopting this into Petersburg Borough Code. So they had to come to you, and you had to say, okay, we'll adopt this. But the innuendo here is, hey, this is a done deal to all of us property owners. I think it should go back to the place where you say, what do the property owners want to do? For crying out loud, the borough owns more land than all of us. That was the other question I had, is where's our new land? Did we get new land becoming a borough like we were told?
It's in the works.
We're going to get it.
And this isn't going to be a question and answer.
I know, but back to this same thing.
Please proceed. Thank you.
So I'm probably out of time almost, but I wanted to just say I want you to reconsider, just simply take this back and ask us what we think first. Maybe everybody who's invested in land that you're getting the tax money from, because you're not getting it from yourself. I know a lot of city land's represented here, borough land. Ask us what we think first. Is that possible?
Well, of course, sir. Anything further?
Yeah,
Time?
I have a lot of things to say, but that's enough for now.
Thank you for your testimony, sir.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lars Christensen, and this only take me a minute or two to say what I want.
Okay.
There's been big changes in my life in the last 3 years, and one of them surprised me. I didn't know it would be involved in getting into politics. But I just want to say, I want to speak on the planning and zoning thing that's coming up. And this is just sort of my say hi. My name's Lars, and you're probably going to hear a lot from me down the road.
Thanks, Lars. Other, yes, please proceed, sir.
Good evening. My name's Ray Olson Jr., and I represent myself and my wife. I'm just going to read you my letter, you guys.
Thank you.
And long forgotten are the overtures of the city of Petersburg in the 70s to the people of Scout Bay on how beneficial it would be for the residents of Scout Bay to become part of the city as it was being annexed into the city. Soon after, in the 80s, came the supposed need, so the zoning was adopted. With the zoning, the people lost the right to do as they pleased on their own property, for they then came under the jurisdiction and the zoning code of the city of Petersburg. And if your property was zoned industrial, one thing I'd like to interject, they asked us at the time what you would want your property to be. And so a lot of people came up with they wanted industrial because it gave it the widest range of uses. So I want to keep that in mind. A conditional use permit was required to build a house on your property. As I now read the current proposed changes regarding the industrial zone property, what was once legal in building a house on industrial land with a conditional use permit is no longer allowed or legal to do. With the proposed zoning code, a house built on the industrial land would be considered non-conforming with termination clauses. I don't know if you guys have read this, but this is scary. I mean, it's a well-crafted letter, and I mean crafted. And my letter. As for the subdivision that was recorded Olson Subdivision Tract B, it is stated in the city website that the lots were created large for on-lot sewer systems. The lots were not made that size because the lots were made that size because that's the size my dad wanted them. And Lester Leatherberry at the time, who was the part of the DEC, would only allow five on-lot sewer systems on the whole subdivision, which is around 34 acres. And then my question is, what's the next stage of the zoning revision? To evict us from our houses? To put us out on the streets? I mean, really, you guys. I think you guys need to go revisit this. You know, it reduces the value of our property to absolutely nothing. And I just ask you to reconsider. Thank you. Or return to the original code.
Thank you, sir. Are there people here tonight who'd like to? Mr. Burke, please proceed.
Hello, I'm Richard Burke. I'm here representing myself, and I'm here for, I guess, now 2 reasons. I want to set the record straight on Bill Mitnich's property. He never once came to a planning zoning meeting. I think that gets really misconstrued. If he would have come to the planning and zoning meeting, we could have listened to his ideas, why he wanted to do what he wanted to do with his property, but he never once showed up. And then I'm here for 14A, where the Assembly is moving forward with putting Mr. Koenig's initiative on the ballot. I think that's an incredible disservice to Doc Lopez, Holly Wengie, and myself, who went to a ton of effort to put the marijuana, fluoride, and ATV issues on the ballot. We had to go collect over 400 signatures each. It was a tremendous amount of effort. I think if you want to give him a free pass to the ballot, you need to change the law so that it's easier for everyone else. I think it's totally wrong for you guys to be playing favorites on this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other audience members who would like to testify? Mr. Medallion, go right ahead.
Harold Medallion, I'm representing myself and my family. And I guess I'll start out with reading my letter that I've sent you, and then you can ask me any questions, or maybe I'll have more time, I can say something else. Mayor and Assembly members, over the past year or more, the Planning and Zoning Commission and its staff have been working on a revision of the Development and Zoning Code. News reports have had borough officials explaining that the existing 1985 code has many contradictory parts due to updates in some sections but not others, that the processes used are cumbersome and slow, and that zoning is restrictive. It has been stated that many definitions in the code are non-existent, blurry, unclear, difficult to interpret and applied consistently, and difficult for people to read and understand, and that the idea of the revision would be to simplify the review and approval processes. This would be done by structuring the revised code along the lines of a model used in Oregon, which used tables and pictures instead of complicated verbiage. Most landowners are in favor of simplification of code and of less restrictive zoning, so none of this has sounded all that controversial. The new code was passed by the Planning Commission with little or no public input and sent on to you. It went through the required 3 readings and was adopted in December pending approval of a new zoning map. In January, property owners received copies of the proposed new zoning map in the mail, and it was on examining these that most of us became aware of the magnitude of the changes. The zoning categories have been changed. There were now 2 commercial zones instead of 3, and 3 industrial zones instead of 1. Boundaries had been moved in several areas, and some were created where none had existed before. Many previously allowed uses had been eliminated. For example, my family and I have for decades owned waterfront property in the C2 light industrial zone. This zone extends from the south parking lot of the South Harbor to the Ocean Beauty Dock. Under the proposed map, it would be changed to the new categories of downtown commercial and general commercial, neither of which zone would any longer allow the marine-related light industrial uses the original zone includes. At the same time, several new light industrial zones have been inexplicably carved out of existing I-1 industrial zone properties in the vicinity of Scow Bay, and the remainder of the I-1 zone broken up into separate categories of waterfront industrial and general industrial with different allowable uses. Examination of the new development code to determine which uses are allowed in which newly created zoning categories reveals it to be a great deal more complex than the existing code, with approximately double the word count. in addition to complex tables and charts, it contains far more complicated verbiage than I could find in the old code. It is much more confusing and difficult to interpret than the existing code, and full of hair-splitting differences in allowable uses and a multitude of required permissions. So instead of the simplified, less restrictive code we were promised, we got a more complex and restrictive one, and on top of that, we find that our property is to be arbitrarily rezoned with many of the allowable uses we value eliminated, all without our input and participation in the process. I have spent the last couple of weeks comparing the old zoning code with the new. One thing that quickly became apparent was that in addition to the existing code being far more straightforward and easy to understand, I was unable to find any obvious inconsistencies in it. The best I could do was come up with a few typographical errors. It was written for Petersburg, Alaska, with a great deal of public input. It is in every way more suitable for our continuing use than the new code, which was written for someplace else with a few changes made and supposedly adapted to our use. I will not say there couldn't be any revisions to our existing 1985 code. That is what most of us expected when we followed the news reports about code revision. But the new code is in every way worse than the old one. It should be rescinded and the existing code revised where necessary. What seems to have been misunderstood by the Planning and Zoning Commission is where the zoning came from in this town and the philosophy behind it. The zoning code we have came from the property owners. It wasn't imposed on them by the Planning and Zoning Commission, its staff, or the City Council. I was on Planning and Zoning during the process, and we had massive outreach to property owners to find out what zoning they desired. Many of them didn't really care to have any zoning, but accepted industrial zoning because it gave them complete freedom to use their land for everything from single-family residential to commercial to full-on industrial. Because of concerns that someone with a home on industrial zone property might someday turn around and complain about a neighbor's legitimate industrial use, the residential uses, including for multifamily structures, dormitories, rooming houses, boarding houses, mobile homes, mobile home parks, and 1- and 2-family dwellings, were allowed under conditional uses. This made possible a review process that put the applicant on notice that they were in fact on industrial property and in no position to complain if an industrial use developed on an adjacent or nearby property. The conditional use permit process is very straightforward. The requirements are not difficult to meet, and many permits have been issued for residences on industrial property. In addition, there are many homes on industrial property that were in place long before zoning. The new development code effectively turns all of these homes into non-conforming uses subject to severe restrictions on additions or to rebuilding after a fire or other disaster. The philosophy behind the present zoning is well laid out in the 1984 Comprehensive Plan. The plan goes into great detail about the public's intent that property owners be allowed maximum freedom and flexibility in developing their lands. It particularly points out the folly of attempting to reserve private waterfront lands for possible future water-dependent uses, stating that it would be a mistake to deny present owners the ability to develop their land according to their own vision in favor of some possible future use which may or may not occur, as to do so would deprive these owners of the present utility of their property and the community of tax revenues.
30 seconds, Mr. Medellin. 30-second warning, sorry.
The 1984 plan lays out very plainly that we as a community intend to let the free market dictate the highest and best uses of property and not let municipal officials dictate the highest and best uses. Naturally, this sentiment came from the people who own and pay taxes on the property, not the public official whose fondest desire was to be allowed to tell owners what they could and could not do with their land. I haven't seen any indication at all that the property owners feel any differently today. Many of them are the same people that owned the property in 1985 or their descendants. Just about all the others paid full market value for their property. If it, as is right and proper, the borough were to contact each property owner and ask them if they were satisfied with their existing zoning under the 1985 code, I believe the majority of them would say yes. This has not been done in spite of plain language of the 2016 Comprehensive Plan stating that after the Comprehensive Plan is complete, the staff will work with landowners, residents, and business to use a generalized land use map to define existing zoning in Service Area 1. Instead of contacting affected landowners, residents, and businesses for their input, it appears that the proposed zoning map has been generated by borough staff alone. I urge you to reject the draft map and rescind the new development code and send the matter back to the Planning Commission and have them start over again with an accurate portrayal of their intentions and with public participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Medellin. Appreciate it.
Yes. Did I make it in time?
Yeah, it was very close. It was well played, sir. Other people who would like to speak this evening on views related to the agenda. Go ahead.
Dave Kensinger, and I'm speaking for myself, also a member of Planning and Zoning. I think what we were trying to do with this whole process was the first stated reason, one of the reasons we started to do it was to create industrial property that was available for industrial development. What's happened since the 1980s is pretty simple. You have a lot of homes, and then you have a lot of industrial activities. And in my tenure on planning and zoning, that leads to a large amount of conflicts. I get it. The biggest problem that this whole process is, you guys haven't adopted the map yet. Planning and zoning, we just started this process. We had a 4-hour meeting the other day. We're going through amendment by amendment. And I urge everybody that owns property in the community, if they have an issue with this, they need to bring this forward. I know we're supposed to have this map done by April. Well, that's probably not going to happen. We're having another meeting tomorrow at noon. I think it'd be appropriate, due to the large number of comments, that this time period be extended. The other thing is, you guys might want to take another look at this. You might want to I don't think you should throw the whole thing out. This has been a huge body of work. It started with the comprehensive plan that started 3 years ago, 4 years ago. You guys adopted that. When you adopted that, that gave us marching orders, planning and zoning, on how to proceed. Then we started the code, and we created more categories. And one of the reasons we created these categories is because the exact instances that Mr. Medallion pointed out. You have houses and industrial activity. So we created another category, and that category, quite simply, is called light industrial. And what light industrial means is you can build a house on it. The one thing that you can do on a light industrial is you can't put a rock crusher on it, you can't put a sawmill on it, you can't put a batch plant on it. So specifically what light industrial is are the type of activities that maybe you wouldn't want to live next to, or you wouldn't necessarily want to have your neighbors doing. And the only thing I can say about planning and zoning is nobody likes planning and zoning. Nobody likes to be told what to do with their property. I get it. But nobody likes it when their neighbor does something that they don't like, and that's when planning and zoning comes in. So I'm just saying we're here to work however you guys want to do it. I get it that people weren't paying attention to this process. It wasn't something we did in the dark. You guys had 3 meetings. We had 2 years of meetings, but I get it. I get it that people, until they get a piece of letter, until they get a letter in the mail saying, guess what, we might be changing your zoning. You might want to take a look at this. And this makes people excited. So in fairness to that, and in what Mr. Medallion said, we do need more time for this process, I think, to work the way everybody in the community wants it to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dave.
Other people this evening who would like to speak on views related to the agenda? Actually, we're going against one. Sorry. Clerk Thompson, did you want to read something into the record?
Thank you, because you guys have put a lot of work into it, and we do appreciate that. It's not a terrible, there's a lot of great uses of this.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much.
You are welcome.
I'm reading some comments. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I apologize.
My name is Karen Olson, and I submitted a letter.
Yes.
We live on industrial land. We've lived there since 1985. We do not use our home base for any industry anymore, since our road keeps getting blocked off since 2002. We intend on building a newer home there, and this whole process is just mind-boggling to me, and it was mind-boggling to hear people on planning and zoning almost poo-poo some of the people who had plans for their retirement, Heather O'Neill in particular, and say that she can't do what she had planned on doing. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Please reject it.
Thank you kindly. I'll pay slightly better attention this time. Was there any other folks here this evening who would like to speak on views related to the agenda? Okay, I'm going to miss somebody else in that one. Whenever you're ready, Clerk Thompson.
Thank you. I'm reading some comments from Mayor Jensen, who couldn't be here this evening. I do not support the use of the assembly chambers for Uncruise Adventures staging area. It will be disruptive to borough staff and people conducting business in the borough offices. I also feel it will set a bad precedence of using borough buildings for private enterprise. And then about the designated assembly seats agenda item.
Okay.
I am opposed to changing the process of electing borough assembly members. I believe it will make for a more controversial election. The process is not broken. Why change it? Mayor Jensen.
That is all?
Yep.
Thank you, Clerk Thompson and Mayor Jensen, for those comments. I'll give one more shot. No one else? Okay. We'll switch it over to persons to be heard unrelated to the agenda.
Hello?
Jeff, you may want to mute your phone, my friend. And there is someone who would like to go. Please proceed. Name and who you represent.
My name is Kathy Reamer, and I represent myself. First, I also want to say that I appreciate the work that the Planning and Zoning Board have done with the direction that they've been given. And I have to say that whenever you affect somebody's pocketbook, there's going to be a lot of controversy, so don't take it personally. I understand that the Borough Assembly passed the language for our zoning codes last fall, and now they're going to review the zoning map, with the first reading being on April 1st. Is the implementation of the code that you passed contingent on the passage of the zoning map? That's a question.
Since we're not be doing a Q&A with that, I don't actually have that answer. Catch up with Liz Cabrera on break, if you would. I'm sure she can answer that question for you.
Great.
Thank you.
I think this is important because I think the borough should know what's being used. The Borough Assembly should know what's being used to as their code when people are building new homes on this property, because when you get a building permit, you're handed the code, and they need to know if they're working under the old code or the new code. So I just want to make that point. I admit I haven't looked at the entire newly passed code. It's too thick, I don't have time, and I probably wouldn't understand the language if I did read it. I did take a look at a synopsis of the information that was available on the Borough website, and 2 items caught my eye. I've highlighted these items for you, and they're on that handout that I gave you. Both of these things are different from what they were in the old code and potentially reduce the value of our properties and further restrict what we do with our property. First, manufactured homes or trailers are allowed on every residential lot in Petersburg under this new code, and I disagree with that for 2 reasons. Manufactured homes are built to lower standards than modular and stick-built homes. They sit on wheels, not foundations. They deteriorate more quickly over time, and they reduce the value of the homes around them. The second thing is nobody that I've talked to knows about this language. If this truly is a change that residents want to this code, then good. But if it isn't, then it shouldn't be in the code, and for people to not know is not okay. This certainly did not come from the community, if nobody knows about it. Let me give you an example of what this does. In my case, I have a 2.5-acre lot across the street from my house that is currently for sale. Under the new code, a person can buy this lot, subdivide it into 8 equal lots, and put a trailer on every lot and sell those as homes. Do the people in my neighborhood want a trailer park? Maybe they do, but maybe they don't. They should have they should be able to make that decision. And they shouldn't be surprised when things like that pop up that they had no clue were coming down the pike. In addition, when I purchased this lot when it was regulated by the old language of the code, believing that there would be no barriers to selling it later on. Now I, as a landowner, have to make a decision about whether or not to sell this property, knowing that it could become a trailer park. The second item I'd like to address is highlighted on the same page, and it's about the size of garages. And mostly, I don't know who I have to ask about this, but I noticed that detached garages are lumped together with warehouses and net houses. And I didn't understand what the old code says. And if you'll look at the column next to old code right there at the bottom, you'll see that it's really difficult. There's just a few numbers, and so I don't know what the old code is. But the restrictions under the new code, while they allow for larger detached garages, they're still very restrictive. Do people know about these restrictions? And I think this is what my main point for tonight is, when things are put on you without conversation, they become surprises. Now, I don't even know if and you don't seem to know if we are governed by the old code or the new code. And I think that's an issue. I think that's a big issue because people's property is their biggest investment. So that's an answer that needs to be addressed. I think we need that answered tonight. Another point I would like to make is that I believe the code and the map need to be sent back to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I too think there are some really great things that are in the new code and the new map. However, I think there are some things that are very debilitating as well. I think that the changes that occurred to each individual thing, like whether or not we have trailers, that every lot in town can have a trailer on it, need to be proposed to every single landowner in this community and need to be discussed. It shouldn't be a surprise. In addition, I think with the uncertainty of our community's future due to the proposed state budget, we need to be very, very careful about making far-reaching decisions at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And just a quick aside, Liz, I misheard her when she was speaking before. We are still currently under the old code at present. Sorry, Kathy, I misheard you there before, so we're on the old one right now.
Okay, good.
It clicked with me afterwards, so I got there. Any other people here tonight with views unrelated to the agenda? Now everyone gets
unrelated.
Oh, unrelated to the... Absolutely, sir.
Thank you.
Of course.
Pete Litzheim, representing the Mill Incorporated, Diamantes, and Teresa Litzheim. So, this is a question, so I'm not going to get an answer, but I want this to go on the record. Is this the Assembly's operanda? I'm trying to be professional here. Is this the way you operate now? You don't talk to the citizens? Is this just for this meeting tonight?
No, the visitors' views, or excuse me, persons to be heard, related or unrelated to the agenda, is by code, not a back and forth. It's a time for us to listen politely.
That doesn't answer my question.
I'm not sure I understand, sir.
I'm asking you, I've been to many council meetings before and talked to the mayor, and the mayor's talked back to me, talked to the assembly, which used to be the council, and I'm just wondering if that is you just make that decision each and every meeting differently, where you can't answer a question of a citizen that elected you?
No, sir. When I'm running meetings, I generally follow code explicitly to a T.
And that's what it is. You don't talk.
That's consistent with Robert's Rules of Order.
Or is that just a lawyer's suggestion?
Pretty much public hearings are for people to be heard, and yes, I agree with you. Usually if there is an assembly member or a board member that would like to ask a question of the person who is speaking, they get the presider's attention, and the presider decides whether or not that person can ask a question of the person speaking, but it really is not a back and forth.
Right, so what I'm going to need to do is go after individual assembly members out on the street or call them at their home and ask them the questions I want to ask them, because I'm not going to get any answers to any questions I got here tonight.
Not in this not in this setting, no.
Just
correct.
For the heck of it. My question is do we adhere strictly to running our meetings based on nobody gets gain? People that get gain from activities in our public meetings should not be a part of the public meeting. And that concerns me, because I've watched as staff, you're looking straight into their eyes. They get monetary gain. And so many times, instead of answering what a citizen's asked, one of you assemblymen or council members will ask that staff member who's getting paid. And then we'll be put off and go sit down, and basically that's it. And that's one thing I would like to see: staff not in this room. Come in as a citizen, don't come in as a paid person giving advice to countermand or change the view of a citizen, or, basically annul it. No, that's not the way it is. Because they get paid, and you're looking them in the eye. So we really can't get down to public matters based on the electorate putting you where you are to make decisions. We have to find out what the people who are getting paid think about that first. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And I might see a lawyer.
That, be moving on to board, commission, and committee reports, and there are none. grab my readers here, bear with me. Nothing on the consent agenda, no report of other officers. Neither a mayor's nor manager's report this evening, so that clips through that. Which brings us to ordinances for third and final reading. Ordinance number 2019-01, an ordinance amending sections 2.20.030, 2.20.060, and 2.34.010B, 2.36.080A, and last but not least, 3.08.010 of the Borough Code to designate assembly seats and directing that the amendments be submitted to the voters of the borough at the October 1st, 2019 election. I would entertain a motion to approve that.
So move.
Second.
The motion has been made by Member Lynn and seconded by Member Wohlhuter. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be voting for this because this has cropped up more than one time. I mean, this is been presented to us more than once. Like a couple years ago, I think it was brought up by the same two people that were trying to do it. And what I would like to do is I'd like to see this go out to the public and put this to rest, one way or the other. So that's why I'm going to vote for it, and I don't believe this is something that I should be doing on my own. I think the public should weigh in on this, and if they vote it down, then that should put an end to this. So that's why I'm going to be voting yes on this for that purpose.
Thank you, Member Wohlhuter. Further discussion?
I have one. Taylor on the phone.
Oh, for those listening at home, Member Norheim has called in. Go right ahead, Taylor.
I think I'm going to go ahead and just change my vote on this one. I thought that article or letter to the editor written had a good point. That I mean, I'm opposed to this, but I allowed it to go through. He made the point of why did he have to do all this legwork for something that I would agree with. I mean, I voted for it on the ATV thing, but we're allowing this, in my opinion, bad idea to go through. So I'm going to be switching my vote on this one, and that's all.
Thank you, Member Norheim. Anyone else for their discussion on this one?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Member Mucci, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm going to be voting against this. I have the same concerns that Member Norheim has. I think Richard Burke did a good job laying out some facts that some of the hoops that he had to jump through and some other people had to jump through to get their initiatives on the ballot. And I don't think we should give a pass to some folks who just put it on there. I think they should have to go through the same process that other people have in the past. The whole issue, so I understand what some of the members are saying. I don't see it being an issue. I think we're trying to solve a problem that's not there. So I'm going to be voting against it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Member Mucci. Further discussion? I'll offer my 2 cents for whatever it's worth. I'll be voting for it tonight. I think Member Wohlhuter summed up my position pretty well. It's been a topic in the community for a bit, and I know as an assembly person I think it makes much more sense for the general public to vote on that, and this would kind of put that issue to bed once and for all. Anybody else for discussion? Clerk, call the roll, please.
Brandy? No. Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
Taylor?
No.
Kurt?
Yes.
Does not pass.
So was that by 3 to 3?
3 to 3.
3 to 3. The motion fails 3 to 3. Moving on to new business. Let me pull this up. That would be 19-141. Assemblymember Norheim requests the Assembly entertain the idea of creating an ordinance to deal with noise complaints. Currently, the Petersburg Police Department follows state statute to handle these situations. Attached is a copy of Juneau's Disturbing the Peace ordinance for an example. I guess I would entertain a motion to develop a Disturbing the Peace ordinance. Cool.
So move, just for the sake of discussion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So the motion has been made by Member Walhooter and seconded by Member Norheim. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Member Walhooter.
Yeah. Chief, can we get your opinion on this?
Want my paid opinion or my personal opinion?
Either or.
Well, the biggest thing is, I mean, I say we stick with the way it is. I mean, currently we enforce it by state statute. If someone's willing to call the police, leave their name, and be a victim, we will prosecute that. If they do not, if they are just mad at their neighbor or call in for every little thing and don't leave their name, we will not prosecute that. We'll just go out there, ask them to stop. But if they're willing to leave their name, we will enforce that. And until they're willing to do that, honestly, I don't think we need this. Because if that person's really bothered by it, they will leave their name. I understand good neighbors, would talk to each other and explain the issue and ask them to be quiet. But until they're willing to do that, I don't think we need it.
And answer your question, Member Walhooter?
Thank you very much.
Of course. Further discussion. Member Lynn.
Yes. In talking about this, the big issue has to do with somebody. I believe in a good neighbor policy, and I think one neighbor ought to be able to talk to another one. And if they're not willing at some point on down the line to put their name on the line, then I really don't think we should go through with it. The other part of that is that I asked the chief today, how many disturbance calls, noise disturbance calls that we got, and how many he operated on last year. And what he was telling me, we probably had about 100 calls, plus or minus, probably plus. And with that, I asked about how many were, followed through. He says most of them were just by the fact that the officer talked to him, the issue went away. So I don't see a need for this either, nor do I believe at this point, with the way our budget looks, that we should be, as a borough, should be taking on that responsibility.
Thank you, Member Lynn. Further discussion. Taylor, did you want to chime in on this one since you brought it up?
I was thinking I should probably speak to why it's on there.
Sure.
I had somebody on the street ask me if we could put the noise ordinance on because we currently didn't have one, and she had an issue with apparently one of her neighbors is a drug addict or something like that and does weird stuff in the middle of the night and is loud, and I guess the problem just doesn't get taken care of, and she thought that this would be a way that maybe she could deal with her neighbor with some poor life choices going on in their life, things like, and she is also suffering the consequences of their bad choices, and she thought this would be a way that maybe she could help reduce, at least get some sleep at night before she has to wake up at 5 or 6 in the morning, depending on what's going on. So that was it. That was all it was.
Thanks, Member Norheim. Anyone else for the discussion on the topic?
Yes.
Actually, this is not a time for public hearing. Mr. Christensen, just assembly discussion at this point. Sorry.
You said anyone, so I thought.
Sorry. Only assembly. I'll chime in on it here at the end of it. I won't be voting for this today. I thank Member Norheim for explaining what he was going for there, and that makes sense. But I really like what Chief Curtis said. We should be accountable. The idea of calling in anonymous complaints could become a real bickery neighbor thing, and that amongst the other pieces, I won't be voting for this. Clerk, call the roll, please.
Jeff?
No.
Bob?
No.
Taylor?
Yes.
Kurt?
No.
Jay?
No.
Brandy? No. Thank you.
And that fails on a 1 to 5. Is that correct, Clerk Thompson?
Correct.
All right. And that brings us on to item 19-115, Uncruise Adventures request to use Borough Assembly Chambers. I would entertain a motion to approve that.
So move.
Second.
The motion is made by Member Wohlhuter and seconded by Member Lynn. Discussion. Member Wohlhuter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm gonna vote no on this one because there are a lot of different reasons. One, I think, is wear and tear on the building. It's going to cost us extra for taking care of the restrooms, and then the building's just going to get wore out. I think it is going to be way more disruptive for the city borough, clerks and things, that work in the building here. So I'm going to be voting no because I can just see this as disruptive. And there's other facilities that can be rented that they have rented in the past, but they've tried to shy away from it. So I'm going to be voting no for this reason.
Thank you, Member Wohlhuter. Further discussion?
Yep.
Member Lynn.
Yes, when we were on the radio today, we had a call in from an individual. That individual said, you as a borough should not be in competition with private industry. And they make a very good point with me on that issue. And I do not believe we should be if there's other sources available, and I think that needs to be explored first.
Thank you, Member Lynn. Member Morrell.
Yeah, I was just going to, basically voice what Bob said, is that I don't think that we need to be in competition with anyone else. I mean, if there's absolutely no other venue, then maybe rent the Parks and Rec or the library or something, but I don't think that we need to be disrupting the staff up here and competing with other private business.
Thank you, Member Morrell. Taylor and Jeff, either of you guys care to chime in?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Nope, sorry.
Jeff.
Go ahead. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Go for it, Jeff. Oops, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I don't want to compete with private enterprise, but I would hope that Uncruise would look around to make sure that there's nothing available for them to use, and if the time comes where they need to approach the city about a place for them to stage some of the folks, we could have that conversation. I know in the past they have used the library, and that didn't work out too well. I think there's some opportunities for them in town. I think if they've exhausted all the private enterprise and they can't find a place to work, I think we should help them out as much as we can. I think we should be welcoming to business and industry in town. And I'd be supporting it after they've looked at all the private enterprise options that were out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Member Michi. Go ahead, Taylor.
Okay. Now, I know both the John Hanson Hall and the Sons of Norway Hall have lots of room for an uncruise type boat, so those would be way more practical than the assembly chambers. No. Just no. They can go somewhere else and use up the private businesses that are more or less built for this type of thing. That's it.
Thanks, Member Norheim. I guess everyone else has voiced their 2 cents off from mine. I guess because I'm in a lone person in a different camp there, I think the assembly chambers one Friday, or each Friday, is pretty good, being pretty good neighbors to them since they're choosing to home port here. I understand the arguments my fellow assembly members have made, but my logic was if we did it here and it didn't work, then we'd very quickly learn it wasn't a good idea. But my 2 cents. So the clerk call the roll, please.
Taylor?
No.
Kurt?
Nope.
Jeff?
Yeah.
Bob?
No.
Brandy?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
And it fails.
On a 4-2 margin. Brings us to 19-116. Request to amend industrial zone allowances in Petersburg. And I'll read the action specifically. Assemblymember Morrell requests Assembly approval to direct Borough staff to rewrite the Petersburg Borough Development Code with regard to industrial zoning and its allowable uses. She would prefer the allowable uses to be changed back to more closely align with the previous allowances for industrial zoned property. I would entertain a motion to approve.
Move.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Morrell, and we'll give it to second by Member Wohlhuter. Now discussion. Member Morrell, please.
Okay, well, obviously there's a lot of people that feel strongly about this, and I don't think that, I think that it was somewhat misleading as to what the purpose was, and so I think that a lot of people weren't maybe paying as much attention until they received a letter in the mail, which was after the code was already approved. In that respect, I think we kind of got the cart before the horse, and maybe we needed to have the map come out simultaneously with the code so that people could look at it together. Granted, it's done, we've already gone past that, so I think that we need to kick it back to the staff and have them relook at it and listen to the citizens and more closely align with our new code, what it was with our old code, and what the citizens want and the landowners want.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Let me ask, I can...
Are you waiting there, Member Wohlhuter?
No, thanks. I'm gonna be voting yes on this because there's just too many people here that have got some problems with the way the code is now written, and I don't want to disrupt the. I don't want to disrupt their lives because of that. So, I'm sorry, did I speak out of turn?
No, you're good. Hang on, wait for you to be done.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Member Lynn, proceed.
All right, I wanted to leave the expert first here. The only problem I have here with this is the allowable back to what was previously there. I have a problem with that part of it because I think planning and zoning has done a lot of good works. I totally agree with when you look at it, and I totally agree with changing the time frame, and I totally agree with going back out. Once people see the zoning map with the code, that's where the rubber meets the road, and that really, we hadn't done that till this point. And so there has to be at least one more, maybe two more iterations of the whole process, in my opinion. So if we voted as it is, I'll vote no, but I do agree with everything because to say that it goes back, she would prefer the allowable uses be changed back more closely aligned. That's the one I have a problem with because I think planning and zoning needs to have the wherewithal to listen to the public, go back out if they need to, do whatever they need to do, and then come back to us with whatever those proposed changes are.
So, are you proposing amending this, Member Lynn, or what are you shooting for here, if I may ask?
I'm headed there, but I want to see where Member Morrell is here.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with kicking it back to staff and letting the people speak to planning and zoning on the code itself, not just the map, and then have them bring it forward. I'm good with that. But I think that we need to allow people, now that they've seen the map and seen the proposed changes, to have their time to speak to planning and zoning, because I think a lot of it was overlooked when it was just the code being put on the table and not with the map itself.
Got it, thank you. Noichi or Norheim, anything to offer at this point? Sorry to put you on the spot, but I can't see you.
I do. Basically, I had heard that I wasn't at the meeting. Laurel was, though, and she said that there was a lot of issue with that one in particular. So, it sounds like a good idea. So many people dropped the ball. It sounded like nobody was paying attention, I guess, and we didn't go to the meetings, and then now the notice was put out, but after the fact kind of thing. And I could probably, vote for this one. It seems like we need to dial things back a little bit and let everybody play catch up on where we're at with this.
Thank you, Member Norheim. Member Nietzsche, anything to offer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have anything to offer. I'm just trying to sort out what we're trying to do here. I'm for letting planning and zoning continue on. Eventually this is going to come before the assembly. It sounds like there's going to be the calendar's going to get pushed around so that there's more time for the community to comment on some of the proposed changes. I just don't think going back to the starting block is the right thing to do. I've been voting against this at this time.
Thank you, Member Nietzsche. I guess I'll offer my 2 cents on it. First of all, thank you to people who came out on this beautiful Monday evening to give us your opinions and for taking the time to write letters. Know that we actually do listen and hear them. I'm just speaking for myself, I know I do. Couple different thoughts. Hang on, Taylor, and let's finish up here, man. Thanks. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I agree with what Dave Kensinger said before, too. I think it's going to be a moving target on timeline. The idea of rushing this for citizens right now, I don't think that makes a lick of sense. It doesn't, for lack of a better way to phrase it, it doesn't feel fair. Because I get it. Like, life's busy. I know for myself, getting a letter in the mail, some of this, too, I'm like, oh. And I feel like I've read a lot on this topic, being in the role I'm in, and I was still, I get it. It's a lot to process. The way this is written right now, I do have issue with it, only in the sense, in the context that it completely bypasses planning and zoning. And for all the hiccups and drawbacks to this process, these guys have been working at it for over 2 years. That's a heck of a long time. I really want planning and zoning to have a hand in that. So if an amendment was made, as Member Morrell and Member Lynn spoke to, I'd definitely be in favor of getting that back in planning and zoning hands to address the concerns that people have brought up tonight and through letters. So if we end up going that direction, I'll definitely be in support of it, my 2 cents.
Okay.
Member Morrell, yes.
When I asked Debbie to do this, it says for staff to rewrite. I think that meant planning and zoning as well with the whole, that was my assumption, was I didn't mean for it literally to be, so I guess maybe there was some wording wrong there.
I'll go for a point of clarification, Clerk Thompson. So as it's written right now, does this capture the thrust of what I was saying and Member Lynn was saying in terms of getting planning and zoning aligned and making sure the people that spoke tonight and through letters are able to have a thorough and deliberate process, including planning and zoning? Is that included in that?
Okay, so
In time frame.
basically, basically the narrative was just a narrative, so it really wasn't the motion. And so you did ask for someone to approve, but I understood what you were approving. To me, it was asking the Assembly to decide, yes, we're going to have to relook at everything. But now Member Morrell has since clarified that she does agree that it should go back to the Planning Commission, and they should look at the code and the map, listen to the people, and bring it back to us later. So in my opinion, that is the motion.
So, just one second, Member Lynn. Meaning, no need to capture the essence of that, no need for amendments, we're good as is.
I believe so, yes.
That is, I feel comfortable with that language, but I want to make sure the other Assembly members do too. Member Lynn, go ahead, you've been waiting very patiently. Sorry, chomping at the bit.
Member Morrell also talked specifically about the industrial, and I agree with that. That seems to be where the heartburn, the major heartburn of everything is, in my reading. And I would like to see that inserted in there some places. We're specifically asking to look at how the 3 zones, the code, and the maps.
Catching that, Clerk Thompson?
For industrial zoned properties.
Yes.
Just a quick pause to clarify. Members Norheim and Mucci, have you been following this?
Yes.
Just want to make sure. Meaning...
Yeah.
Cool. You too, Jeff?
Kinda.
Clerk Thompson. Can you hear Clerk Thompson when she speaks, Jeff?
Yes, I can. I'm just curious, is this what we were originally doing in this whole process, or is looking at the light industrial something new that planning and zoning is going to look at?
Well,
thank you, Clerk Thompson.
Yes. Member Mucci, the code itself has already been approved by the Assembly, so planning and zoning will need to go back and look at the industrial definition and allowable uses and try to incorporate the comments that they've been receiving and change the code that has already been approved. Recommend a change to the code, correct, that has already been approved.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the clarification.
And I've got one more clarification here as well. A member of the public tonight, Ms. Kathy Reamer, brought up some concerns regarding residential stuff and questions when she brought the visual for us. This might not even be an appropriate question, but will stuff like that be on the docket on tomorrow's planning and zoning meeting?
I think that they are taking comments on any zoning issues at the planning and zoning meeting.
Got it. So I would encourage the member, I would encourage Ms. Reamer to get in contact with planning and zoning tomorrow so your voice can be clearly heard at the appropriate time. I'm sorry, I saw you looking over there, so I want to make sure you got acknowledged on that. Member Linda, do you have something else?
Yes. There was a number of letters that came to the Assembly that did not go to planning and zoning that I talked today with Debbie about that need to be forwarded to them as part of that consideration.
But back to the point at hand, any further discussion on the motion? Yes, Member Wohlhuter.
One clarification here. I would think that it might be a little more. It seems like the last sentence that she put in there, she would prefer the allowable uses to be changed back to more closely align with the previous allowance for industrial zone property. I think that kind of hems in the planning and zoning, with that statement. I think it would be just as clear to say Assembly Member Morrow requests Assembly approval to direct Borough staff to rewrite the Petersburg Borough Code with regard to industrial zoning and its allowable uses. We could probably simplify it just that much.
Period.
I think, if we wanted to amend it.
First, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
I'm going to get the language wrong here, so I apologize in advance. Instructing P&Z to change something is probably not what we want to do. I would suggest that you instruct them to look at it and to listen to the comments and review all of that and come back with their recommendations to the Assembly, rather than trying to specifically tell them to change something. They may, as a group, come in and say, we don't want to change industrial, we want to change something else to make this work, and then change how the land use map looks. I'm just kind of hesitating to say, does the Assembly want to give direction to actually do something versus go through it, review it, and continue the process that they've been going through for a while, but take all these letters into account.
Since you're the one who brought this up, Member Morrell, does that work for you?
Yes.
Thank you for being simple about that one. I appreciate it. Member Wohlhuter, does that satisfy you as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Excellent. Jeff or Taylor, anything else to add to this not confusing at all situation we're in right now? That's satire?
Mr. Mayor, can someone just clarify what's the wording of the motion?
Clerk Thompson, take it away.
Okay, let me see if I can do this from my notes here. Basically, the Assembly is requesting the Planning and Zoning look at the development code that has already been passed by the Assembly and listen to comments from the public and see if they feel there should be changes made to the code and come back with any recommendations for changes to code or the zoning map at a later date.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely, and just to be clear on that, I can definitely work with that language. I'll be voting yes on that because to me that really ensures the people who have turned out tonight and sent us letters or posted aside at the grocery store are getting a chance to get their voices heard and their issues addressed clearly. And with that, is there any further discussion on this one? Anybody want any further clarifications? Are we feeling good? That was a half joke, sorry. Clerk, please call the roll.
Taylor.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Kurt.
Yes.
Randy. Yes. Bob.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Well done getting through that one, everybody. Moving on to communications. There are none. Brings us to Assembly discussion items. That is 19-119, special meeting of fiscal year 2020 budget presentation and discussion. The action itself, Manager Giesbrecht and Director Tao request to schedule a special meeting to go over the proposed 2020 budget during the week of April 15th through the 19th, 2019. First reading of the 2020 budget ordinance will take place at the May 6th Assembly meeting. Since a discussion item, Steve, I'm going to pass that right to you since you wanted to speak to it. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you. What we'd like to do is, like we've done in the past, where we will deliver the budget to the Assembly, and Finance Director Tao will do a presentation, and we'll try to do actually all of it in one fell swoop, both general fund and enterprise funds. Answer questions of the Assembly, try to, get it close enough, and get ideas from the Assembly on what changes you want us to make before we go into the first reading on May 6th. We have a very tight timeline. It takes 3 readings to pass the budget, and then we have to set a tax rate, and that has to be all done before the middle of June. So not a lot of wiggle room. I want to add this in. I fully expect that we will know very little from the state on what their budget's going to look like. So it's going to be kind of a status quo type budget, and unless we hear something in the meantime about what the state's going to do. I hate to say this because it sounds scary, but I think we'll probably likely have to come back in the fall after the after the state has finally decided on a budget and everybody gets back from fishing and being out of town, and they very likely have to come back and redo the budget process to take into account changes that the state has done. Again, we don't know that. We don't know what will happen, but we're kind of at least mentally preparing for that.
Well, I think that's... I'd rather not agree with you there in terms of having to come back in the fall, but the way the state is looking right now, I think would be a flawed expectation to have clarity by the first week in June. We very well may, but I'm not going to be holding my breath.
Yep.
So with that, though...
a date for that week
yeah, let's,
would be great.
Anybody have an objections to meeting that week? Let's do the musical chairs on days here, everyone.
We have a 6 p.m. assembly meeting on the 15th, first of all.
So there's that. I'm open to suggestions from the assembly here. Someone feel free to speak up.
I missed what day, the 15th of April?
Yeah, somewhere between the 15th and the 19th, Taylor.
Okay, that should work for me, I hope.
Roger. Member Mulhuter.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. This is a directive for the manager. Steve, how long do you think this meeting should last?
4 hours.
Okay.
Sir, I don't know. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say then that shoots down an hour before the assembly meeting. Okay.
Director Tao is usually about an hour or 45 minutes to an hour in her presentation, if I remember correctly from last time.
Yeah, but twice, because in the past we've done it separately at times, and sometimes we've done it together. So a lot just depends on the questions the assembly has. It could be a couple hours, or it could be, if you want to get into line items on the budget, it could take a lot longer.
So in other words, probably not before the meeting, Kurt.
Yeah, not before the meeting.
Yeah, sorry.
Shoots that one down.
No, you're good.
I wasn't being sarcastic.
Yeah, no. Thank you.
All right, let's... I'll throw one out there and just see if it works for people. Like, what would 6 p.m. on the 17th look like? An evening meeting, 6 p.m. the 17th? Sorry to staff on that one, because I know it's an evening, but it's more likely a time we can get us all together.
That's a Wednesday?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
That's fine. Members Mucci or Norheim, 2 cents either direction on a special meeting for the Wednesday the 17th at 6 p.m. in the Assembly Chambers?
My schedule is basically, as soon as we're done with this herring thing in Sitka, I'm going to go long lining. Should only take maybe a week at most. So really it depends on when this is done. I would hope it would be done by then, but I can't really say.
Yeah, you bet. Keep us posted on that one. Jeff, how does it work for your world? We've got 4 of us right now, but the more the merrier.
Sure. You schedule it when you want. If I'm there, I will definitely participate. We usually do herring work until the middle of May. But, I do have a question about this whole process. So if we're going to have this meeting on the 17th, so are we, during this meeting, are we looking for suggestions on additions or subtractions in city services? Or are we going to wait until we see what the governor does for us? Or when is the opportunity to look at cuts to city government and or additions to city government?
Right on, Jeff. I'll answer that. I'm going to pass it to the manager, too. And Steve, the way I understand it is, yes, that meeting is a time for that, if I'm correct.
Yes, sir.
Go right ahead.
Okay. If Jody and I can deliver a balanced budget to the Assembly, one of the things that will be included in her presentation is how we balanced it. What did we do to get it? If we can't, then clearly a lot more cuts become into the equation at that meeting. That does not mean, even if we give it to you balanced, that the Assembly cannot say, hey, this is the time we would like to talk about cutting this, changing this, adding something. So that's why I only half sarcastically said 4 hours, because this is going to be our best opportunity, the Assembly's best opportunity, to identify places they'd like us to change in the budget and have that discussion and have a vote to tell us to go change that, and to give Jody and myself and the other department heads a chance to make sure that we can do whatever comes up, get the budget changed, and get it ready for the first reading on May 6th.
That answer your question, Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I have prepared a list of things I'd like to see reduced and added. Should I just go ahead and resubmit that, or should I wait? I mean, I think we all know what my list has been, and you know, for me, sometimes it gets lost in the weeds. We come up with a balanced budget, and you know, I'm all for streamlining the borough government, and if there's things that we could possibly do to make that happen, or, you know, I've been trying to get an EMS coordinator firefighter to help out at the fire hall. I just want to know when to do that. Sooner. I don't want to wait till the meeting on the 17th to do it. I'd like to get it ahead of time so Steve and the assembly can and the community can see what, you know, some of my thoughts were.
Well, if I'm understanding the process correctly, Member Michi, you can send that to all of us whenever you're ready, and then the time for formal action will be at that member meeting on the 17th. Sound good?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Member Lynn.
Yeah, question for you. So will that be an actual assembly meeting, or is it going to be a work session?
We're actually going to do this as a special meeting so that the assembly can actually vote on any changes made that night. That way, there's nothing left for chance.
Besides 3 readings of the budget, of course.
Which, again, the assembly can choose to change it again at each of those 3 meetings. It just starts getting progressively harder for us to get the changes done and get the calculation done that we need to do to set tax rates and get that published. So, again, we'll do it as a special meeting so the assembly can actually vote on items.
Yeah, but Bob, go ahead.
The second question on that, is your assumption then, yours and the finance director's assumption, that we will come in with the same budget as we had last year, or are you going to make an estimate of what we can expect? How do you plan to approach it?
I'm not going to try to assume I know what the state's going to do. So, I mean, I'll give you an example. One of the things that the governor's budget has listed was to stop reimbursement on the school deferred maintenance bonds. So that's roughly $466,000 a year, 1.7 mils that would go directly to the taxpayers. We will not make that assumption unless the governor's budget is signed by then, because then we would be charging taxes and then have to turn around and find a way to either refund or do something different if, in fact, the budget didn't get approved that way. So we'll go into that with some certain assumptions that are identical to what we dealt with this year. There are some things that will have to change because wages go up a little bit, health insurance likely will go up, insurance rates will go up for property. Certain things will rise, and we'll have to adjust that through either cuts or tax increases. I've kind of heard directly from assembly members they would prefer not tax increases. So we may have to make adjustments to the budget to get it balanced to deliver it to you on that day. I will not, at least at this point, we are not going to take into account the governor's proposal unless it's signed into law.
As part of that question, that deferred maintenance that would come back, if the governor chooses to send that back to us, it wouldn't matter. We'd still have to go out and for a special election to collect the tax.
No, actually, on the deferred maintenance bonds, when those bonds were originally voted on by the public, that gives the assembly the right to, they go immediately to the taxpayers. In Service Area 1, no vote, since the vote's already been held. So if the state changes their mind and no longer reimburses us for those school bonds, that will go on the tax bill under the debt service section.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Kurt.
And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong there, but that would just be tacked on to property tax.
Correct.
Yeah, just so the listening public out there doesn't think that there's going to be another sales tax or anything coming down the way.
Sorry.
So yeah, it'll just be an increase in property tax.
Rate. Okay. Correct.
And again, we'll have to wait and see how the governor's budget proceeds, but your point's well taken, Mr. Manager. Back to the task at hand for discussion item. As of right now, it sounds like we've got at least 4. Hopefully Mayor Jentz can be there, so we'll go with Wednesday the 17th, 6 p.m. All right. Brings that on to 19-120. I'll pull that up. Assembly Member Mucci requests discussion of the job description for the Emergency Medical Services Coordinator / firefighter position. Jeff, you want to lead us out?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to thank the Assembly for leaving this on the agenda. It's been a struggle to get it on there as a discussion item. I'm just trying to sort out if this job description is kind of looking, it's a description of what we're looking for, what the Assembly is looking for in this position. This is not a new position. This is a position that hasn't been filled for many years. And for folks who haven't spent a lot of time up in the fire hall within the EMS program and the firefighters, there's a crisis going on up there where making a couple of our personnel work a lot of hours, and I think we need to have some help up there. I mean, it all sounds really good that, you don't want to hire somebody, but if you call the ambulance and they're taking longer to get to your house because they don't have enough people to respond to your dwelling to help you out in a time of need. And I see the need up at the fire hall, and I just wanted to know if this description is something that the Assembly could live with. I mean, I'm not saying go out and hire this person now, but just the job description is something that Sandy has been working pretty hard to kind of put it all together, and I think just staff is kind of looking for some direction at this point. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jeff. Anyone else want to comment on that? I'll jump in on that one. Go ahead, Taylor. I'll wait.
Okay. I see it as Sandy needs some help up there. I mean, she's swamped. I don't know if I would hope you've been to her office and know what it looks like. There's papers everywhere, man. I'm also, I don't know what we're discussing here, really. I know that we're going to have some huge cuts coming down, and I would love for her to have some help and have somebody there that is maybe just like the training officer type person. I'm just concerned that there's going to be no money for it. Although, but she needs some help, and we can't afford it now.
Thanks, Taylor. What I was going to offer on that, I guess I'll speak directly to you on this, Member Mucci. Just from my own perspective, I like how this is written up. I think the wording is good. So in short, I think the job description is great for the Emergency Medical Services Technician and firefighter position. I appreciate Sandy and whoever else put work into getting that set up. Hopefully we can make it happen. Other discussion, if any? Okay. That brings us to 15-382. Recognitions. Any Assembly members could recognize anyone this evening?
Hey, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Member Mucci.
It's not really part of the discussion, but I was just wondering under communications if, and maybe you talked about it when I was trying to sort out my phone here, but is there a will on the Assembly to send a letter to the governor regarding the traveling roadshow budget presentation that he's going to be giving to the Interior, to invite them to at least do the same thing to several communities, including Petersburg, so Southeast communities can see the same presentation that they're giving in other places around Alaska.
I think it's been discussed at the Assembly level yet, unless I've missed something, have we? Rick Thompson? Go right ahead, Steve. No worries.
I can't think of a way that the Assembly can approve a letter. It's not on the agenda, and I clearly don't have a letter for you. But what Assemblymember Mucci is speaking to, if you haven't seen your email, is the governor's announced a road show to talk about his budget. He's not coming to Southeast.
Nope, he's not.
Zero. Nome, Kenai, Anchorage,
Fairbanks. I saw that on there.
And I think but he's not coming. He's not even doing it in Juneau. So anyway, we'll talk to our legislators, which we can do. Encourage them if they have some input to the governor. I would encourage citizens of Petersburg, as well as individual Assembly members, to, maybe write letters or emails to the governor, ask him to, it'd be helpful if he comes to Southeast to give us what his feelings, thoughts are. But currently we're not on the list.
Totally. And any Assembly member could request that as an action item for the April 1st meeting, which I will probably just do myself. We'll put that on there, Clerk Thompson.
Okay.
Some sort of letter requesting that. Did that answer your...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. He was probably going to do it when he came to Petersburg for a little Norway, so I might have missed that.
You very well may have, Member Miucci. Thank you. And we'll get that on the next agenda. Any other any recognitions from Assembly members? In that case, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. So move. Moved by Member Morrill, second by Member Olhutter. Meeting adjourned.
Waiting on you. Hold on, waiting on you.
Good job, sir.
I like it having it.
Yeah, yeah. No, you got it. No, you got it. You got it.